All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live this morning, and in studio, I'm not alone actually. I'm joined by three amazing young people. Kennedy Wangari, who is a data scientist from UNEP. A very good morning to you. Karibu, and good to see you. Finally, after speaking for quite some time. We also have Angela Minayo, who is an advocate of the High Court and as well as a Women Digital Rights Programs Officer from KICTANet. You'll tell us about KICTANet and what it entails and why you advocate for safe spaces online. And also, we do also have John Mudhuri, who's a Senior Programs Officer from Article 19 Eastern Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good to see you as we converse around this issue of staying safe online. What does it mean when you're saying we need to stay safe, we need to create safe spaces online? What are some of the challenges that we are facing? Are there any trends that we should be worried about, especially as young people? And so, you know, great opportunities lie in the digital space, but also great challenges lie there too. So let me begin with you, Kennedy. When we're talking about creating a safe space and a safe online space, what does it, maybe just give us an idea, start from the basics. What does it mean? Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Zainab, for having me. Excited to be here.
Right.
When you talk of having a safe internet space, in layman's term, we are thinking we're referring to an enabling and conducive digital environment,
right,
or digital ecosystem that we can be able to have factual conversations, we can be able to promote our businesses, we can be able to support decision-making processes.
Right.
When we're talking of a safe internet space, we're looking at how do we ensure that as users that we're able to navigate through the digital ecosystem and do our work safely as while having our data being secure and safe. Yes.
All right. So, I mean, Angela, I know that KICTANet has actually done a lot of work in terms of trying to look at the trends, especially online and on social media, in terms of online harassment, cyberbullying. There was a report that was published. I've not taken a look at that report, but also give us an idea of that, report and what KICTANet stands for in terms of creating safe spaces online.
Thank you for having me. So at KICTANet, I lead the Women Digital Rights programs, and what we have done is we have been doing research on online gender-based violence. So first of all, I have to give a caveat that online violence can happen to any gender, but we see that women are more disproportionately affected, and not just women, but we also see more attacks towards minorities and people who might have a different sexual orientation or a gender expression. So like kinuthia, or people who do not express the gender that they were assigned at birth or the gender that they have been socialized with. So you'll see maybe a man dressing up as a woman or things like that. So we see more attacks geared to such groups. And for women, we've done 2 reports on trends of online violence against women in politics, because we realized women in politics and women who are more outspoken get attacked more. So what we do to mitigate online violence is, first of all, to have capacity building around digital security. Digital security is actually the missing gap between online safety and these minority groups, because with certain measures such as good cyber hygiene practices, like having strong passwords, they can at least avoid hacking and such incidences. We also build capacity around reporting, so training people on how to report such incidences to social networking platforms such as Facebook. So all the time I tell people that there are 3 dots on most social media sites, on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter as well, and it will allow you to report a post that has harmful content. So another thing that we're also working on is working on legal and psychosocial support to victims, because for a long time we've been talking about what online gender-based violence is and what it looks like, but what happens to the victims and what recourse do they have? So we will be training now, giving legal remedies, as well as having a therapist to guide victims on how to deal with the mental anguish that comes with online violence.
Right.
Yeah.
And John, I mean, I feel like when we're talking about this, either we lack digital literacy or understanding of how it works, because there are so many things that we perhaps need to look at in terms of also policy and regulation as well. But do you feel like, you know, the world in general, especially young people, do we lack the understanding of how, you know, the Internet of Things work?
I think it starts by just understanding or appreciating the negative effects of hate speech. I think we look at it from a very myopic approach. We see it as a very small thing. So I'll start maybe by just even giving a historical background of what hate speech can do, so that at least we can appreciate how bad it is. I mean, if you look back before even social media time, the Holocaust, what led to that was hate speech, to an extent of having a whole ministry just with propaganda against the Jewish. Before even then, we saw in Rwanda the attack on Tutsi and the moderate Tutsi, whose death and whose attack was because of hate speech, being dehumanized and being called cockroaches. And now, during now the social media time, we've seen genocide or even killing in Rohingya for the minority. We've seen it against Muslim minority in Sri Lanka, in India. We've seen it against LGBTI community and people who express themselves differently. So we need, first of all, to appreciate the dangers of hate speech even before we just look at it from the social media context. But beyond that, and just to respond to your question in terms of policy and legislative framework, the first thing is to say we have to strike a balance between freedom of expression, the free speech, and hate speech, so that we do not over-legislate and therefore infringe on people's right to freely express themselves. Now, if you look at our context in Kenya, for example, in my own opinion and our position as Article 19, we have over-legislated when it comes to hate speech. There are nearly 5 laws in this country that just talks about hate speech. The Constitution of Kenya, Article 33, Sub-Article 2, talks about hate speech and what have you. If you go to the Penal Code, Section 138 talks again about hate speech in the context of religious, in the religious context. When you go to the National Cohesion Integration Act, 2 sections of the same laws talk about hate speech. You go to the Kenya Information KICA Act, the Kenya Information Amendment Act, again, the general guidelines talks about it. So it leaves us with the question, if we've legislated this too much on hate speech, and then what is the problem? And that the point of media literacy now comes in. Do we know how to use these gadgets that we have? Social media has opened a lot of opportunities. Right. Businesses, connecting, what have you. But then do we know how to use it safely? Do we understand the dangers of the issues that are there? But also, do we also create awareness on this policy and legislative frameworks that we have? Or are they just a privilege of the 3 of us who are seated here, civil society organization, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, and not the actual users of these products that are leading to actual physical harm? We've seen people dying because of social media posts in Ethiopia and what have you. So beyond just having legislative and policy framework, we need to look at the practice, but also we need to look at awareness creation. All right.
You talk about the issue that we have enough laws and we have enough regulations, but look at it this way. You cannot control the internet. I mean, when you're looking at the jurisdiction, for example, you find an image that was generated somewhere in Ethiopia that is widely circulated in Kenya. Probably, I don't know, you have some other people who are using some servers somewhere else in Russia who are trying to perpetuate a certain agenda. So the jurisdictional regulation would be quite problematic, even when it comes to accounting to the perpetrators of such kind of, let's say, images, videos, messages that are geared towards trying to, focused on a certain group of people or an individual. It would be difficult. So how do you address that?
A couple of things there. I think it starts even with the definition of hate speech itself, which there is no internationally legally acceptable definition of what hate speech. Now that leaves every context to define what hate speech is. But then when it comes to the actual content on social media and how do we debunk myth, lies, facts, truth, misinformation, and disinformation, then it goes down to a multi-stakeholder approach. It calls for And I talked about media literacy, what, for example, KickTernet is doing, and the rest. It goes about now the tech companies themselves, and in terms of what they are doing in terms of content moderation, but also the fact checkers and people who are using these products. And Angela has talked about the 3 dots that are there on social media, most of these social media products. Do people know how to flag and report content?
Right.
Are we responsibly using social media platforms? Are we the people who receive something and then we retweet without fact checking, without knowing if it's true or if it's not true? Are we the people who just forward everything that we receive as well? Do we know how to flag and report content? So it goes again back to media literacy. Do people know how to, ensure that the space that they're using for connection or for business is safe for themselves and those who they're working with?
Right. And Kennedy, when you're looking at the responsibility that would befall big tech, for example,
Yes.
does it befall that, on their shoulders the responsibility of ensuring that what is captured online is, safe, is good, is void of hate speech and harassment and bullying? What responsibility befalls big tech when we're talking about Twitter and, Facebook and Instagram?
Great question. There's been a push by regulators, both at international levels, all the way to national level, and looking at the African context, we've been able to see that there's the big push for the big the big tech firms to regulate how their conduct in terms of content moderation, as mentioned by by Muthuri, and also in terms of their labor practices within the African context.
Right.
And a good way is that we're able to see even at the United Nations level, it's coming up to support the big tech companies towards the implementation of what now we have in it's almost in the enactment process. That's the Big Tech Accountability Act. And this being a cross-border regulatory mechanism, it's really coming in to look at, these big tech companies, they have their social media policies in terms of how they moderate the content within their platforms to minimize cases of hate, discrimination, and to just ensure that their platforms are safe. But we've seen that many other times they've not lived up to the policies that we just have. A good example is Meta. If you look at their promises in terms of their AI algorithms for combating disinformation and fake news globally, pretty awesome and exciting policies on paper. But when it comes to actual implementation, if you were to even draw to the Kenyan context, like the build up to last year's election, we even had NCIC issue a 7-day warning to Facebook that, you know what, Facebook, we have, we almost building up to Kenyans' election. There's a lot of the political information terrain. It's quite polluted. And if you're not going to make sure that your platform abides with our laws, then we're going to ban you from our country. Again, if you're to even go further to look at these years during the, in February, I believe so, when the Supreme Court made a ruling on the LGBT community and the association in Kenya, we saw a lot of cases of disinformation being spread across Facebook and other platforms, and all these have led to either psychological effects and some of also the other effects that were mentioned by a co-panelist in terms of the effects of the hate speech. And all these, I would go on and mention of local context cases that we've had of hate speech. And all this shows us one thing. One, the big tech companies have policies in place. But implementing them in our local, that is within the African context, has been a challenge. And that's why if you look at even in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya, there's there are already lawsuits against anti-competition rules and the antitrust laws, all against how these big tech companies are coming to the African digital ecosystem, and the promise that they are making in terms of making sure that the internet space is safe vis-a-vis the actual implementation.
Which is quite wanting.
Which is quite wanting. And if we were to go deeper, there are a lot of cases that have led to the push, even the UN coming on board to tell the big tech companies, you know what, we have the UN principles, and part of our work is to also ensure that we combat hate speech. And we can support you in your work, and that's where the Big Tech Accountability Act comes in, and also looking at within our African context and at national levels, how are these big tech companies operating in terms of the content moderation, in terms of labor practices. It was mentioned that currently in Kenya,
but do you feel like there's quite a thin line, and I think it's what John had mentioned a little bit earlier on in a different context, but that thin line between let's say access to freedom and published content, my freedom, you know, and you know that almost tips over to that other side, hate speech. And why do you want to control what I feel I should say? This is my freedom to talk about these things.
As enshrined in our constitution, our 2010
Right.
constitution, there's the freedom of speech, association, and expression. But then again, there are limits in terms of how to make sure that you're not violating someone else's rights, and also ensuring that you're countering hate speech. And again, at a local context, we can say in terms of laws, regulations, and legal provisions, we're making great strides. At an individual end user, there's need, as earlier mentioned, to promote media and information literacy in terms of how do we responsibly navigate through the digital ecosystem, what's our role, what's our mandate, what's the role of the big tech companies, how are they performing, and what's the gap. And I think that's why now we are not getting to see, even within the African context, continent, having African countries coming together to have a united front, because we've seen that we have our local laws that governs our countries, like the case of Kenya and how NCAC had to put Facebook on hold, even within the African context. But we've seen how these big tech companies are performing, some of them even violating some of the rules while they're being sued. And I think there's a thin line between how they're performing, the role for us as the end users, and also, I think that's where now the emergence of the local regulators pushing for new regulations and ensuring that we have guardrails in terms of how do we moderate, how do we ensure we put these big tech companies accountable on the operations, be it the labor practices, be it on the content, and also ensuring that the users who are leveraging these platforms, they're safe and secure.
All right. With the users, just very quickly before I go to Angela, I mean, public, especially within the Kenyan context, do you feel we're more aware of the fact that
here we have IC Public in, I think as a country, we're also making great strides in terms of the legal actors, in terms of how do we ensure that the security hate speech on 18th June. And we will get there in terms of making sure that, I think last year, the build up to the election, we partnered with one of two fact checkers companies that is Bold Journalism, to ensure that our people out there have access to accurate, called Good News app. And this app is to basically ensure that you can be able in real time, it's able to flag any some of these promising strides. And all I can say is that we are not yet there with digital access, but we are making great
of understanding the differences of what is happening online. And they do have, we live in a world where things are changing, and from a young age, minors, especially children, how does that pose?
I've really been struggling with.
Yeah.
I recently had the precludes flagging or age verification on the substance of the content that these minors will be possession. About security of the law, Kenya is making countries in the world to have an act, a children's act that was amended last year. We have a new minors online. So it's quite progressive analyzing that act, because it's quite progressed. They have published the Children Online Protection Guide that children can easily understand how to keep themselves safe and stuff like that.
Right.
Also, there's a digital enquiry kit module for children, so that children can learn basic digital, but understanding that children are on a spectrum. The children who are 5 and the children who are 11, the internet for an 8-year-old is not the same way you're going to police the internet for an that embraces tech, but in a safe way. I'd also like to highlight that, again, Kenya is very, that children will be able to learn how to code from the school. So again, creation and as a career avenue for children.
40% of penetration?
Yes,
internet penetration in Kenya. Now, I'm imagining supposed to get probably a phone, so that can be, it would be difficult to perhaps weigh the perpetration of a photo or something, telling them, you know, you're doing a good job. I'm trying to imagine how we can be able to, perhaps parents, teachers are really
work alongside tech companies in how they develop this product.
Right.
Because I asked the same question, message this child, and they say that be safe online, it takes both the guardian and mitigate the harm. Parents will have to sting me on Discord or on open enough to tell you these things. then we might not be able to counter the grooming that is rampant on social media sites. At the same time, I would also like to say that we have security agencies that are doing quite a good job. And I like to speak about them in a positive light because there's some level of helplessness and hopelessness when you talk about online safety for children. We have a dedicated anti-trafficking and child protection unit at the DCI, and some of them are my friends that work there, and they do quite a tremendous job in even tracking groomers. Even in the middle of a live stream when a child is being abused, they're able to get the locations and get the police and get the children to safety. So in our own little way, we are trying to counter child online safety issues, but it takes a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Let me hear from John on what you think of that.
I think Angela has covered most
pretty much all of it, right?
I think the only emphasis that I can make is just speaking from the last part to it. I think one of the problems that we have when it comes to, you know, ensuring safety and security on social media platforms, especially for minors, is what is also happening offline. People not knowing or being ignorant of the law as well. Opportunities are there for us to prosecute, but also to hold accountable those who perpetrate these. And some of the laws that have been mentioned, the Children Act, but also the controversial as it is, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act, which also talks about child pornography. So it's for us again to take advantages of these laws that are there to come out and ensure that those who perpetrate this act are also held accountable.
Right. All right, and on that note, we are just going to take a very short break here on AM Live, but we'll be having this conversation in just a short while, so stay with us. Talk to us. The hashtag we're using this morning is AM Live NTV at NTV Kenya. We'll be sampling some of your views later on in the broadcast, so stay with us and talk to us. What do you think of this particular topic?
She runs an organization that helps immigrants settle in the U.S.
You need to know where to get the right food, the right neighborhood. When you are trying to get a house, you need somebody to co-sign for you.
Yes, this week on Daring Abroad, Dr. Trufena Choti's humanitarian work and her journey abroad.
I've supported over 20 countries in Africa with different programs.
Also on the show, Solution Sacco's services to Kenyans abroad as it turns 30.
I've invested in real estate. I have invested in agriculture.
We have a Solution app. You can onboard yourself. You register as a member.
And are Kenyans living abroad supposed to pay tax back home?
Yes and no.
Blueband peanut butter, made with 100% pure peanuts and a good source of omega-6. Grow healthy and happy kids with Blueband peanut butter. Available in 200 grams, 400 grams, and 800 grams. Buy a pack today.
Nunua KPLC tokens, Bila charges. Only on Airtel Money. Dial *334#. Select Lipa na Airtel Pay Bill, then select KPLC.
Do not hold back in any situation. Eno gets to work on the 6 symptoms of heartburn fast.
You do know you said all of that out loud, right?
If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
As a mother, I have to do my duties in the house. It forces me to send her to the river because I have no alternative.
Piaora okber, ler bedoko ler. Otuo nikech piaora. Otuo ok odhi skul, japuonj chunye chandore.
If children had water close by, they won't be sick, they won't be distracted because the water is clean.
Every month, millions of women across the world go through their period. But it's very sad that many women, not just across the world, but even in Kenya, have to contend with the shame of what is a natural occurrence in their body. And so at Nation Media Group, in having this conversation and a changing cycle, we want to bring this to the fore so that we can be able to tackle the shame, we can be able to tackle the kind of cost that is associated with this event every month. And for us, starting this conversation is just the beginning, but in other people participating, it then helps us to reach a much wider audience.
Father's Day was celebrated this past Sunday, and one of the highlights has to be nominated Senator Karen Nyamo's decision to buy Samido a bottle of liquor worth 420,000 shillings. While the amount may seem too high for some people, it's not the first time pombe may cost Karen Nyamo juu ya Samido.
I called the police officer in charge of the province and requested him to give us the vehicle. In fact, he told me that their vehicles are not for hospital. I said, no, the vehicle, the police vehicle is for everybody. It's written on Utumishi kwa wote.
He was to be carried with a police vehicle. That's arrest.
No, the child was not going to be arrested. The child was already ready in theater.
2 out of 3 Kenyan parents felt that they don't spend enough quality time with their kids. You can help change this by giving a generous voice to Storytime. Visit our library of homegrown audio stories at cadbury.africa and make Storytime sweeter.
Cashless payments and digital financial solutions have gained traction in Kenya as the digital economy deepens its penetration and many seek the convenience of e-commerce. According to the central bank, the total number of mobile-based transactions stood at a staggering 1.2 billion Kenya shillings in July 2022, transacting $23 billion that month alone. How can we leverage digital payments as an engine of fostering financial inclusion? How can digital payments help to accelerate the formalization of Kenya's vastly informal business landscape? How can digital payments serve as a catalyst for Kenya's quest for sustainable path to decarbonized growth? On Tuesday, 27th June, starting 7:30 p.m, NTV Kenya will host a live panel to unpack the role of digital payments specifically in relation to micro, small and medium enterprises in Kenya's growth and development agenda.
And welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live on NTV. It's all about safeguarding the digital space across the world, not just in the country. But Kennedy, I know you're quite big on artificial intelligence. So people talk about using artificial intelligence and creating a safe ecosystem, digital safe ecosystem. But just give us an idea, first of all, AI, what's it all about in terms of using it in this particular space by combating hate speech and all these things, misinformation, disinformation online?
Great, thank you for the question.
Right.
I think I'll start with layman's definition of what artificial intelligence is all about for the better understanding of our audience. When we talk of artificial intelligence, we talk of programming of computer systems or mobile applications to simulate or sort of mimic human intelligence capabilities. And when we talk of an application mimicking human capabilities, we are talking of capabilities such as how you can be able to make decision-making processes, how you can be able to translate over languages, how as a human being you can be able to visually look at something and make machine vision, and also how you can be able to leverage on your speech for data-driven decision-making processes. And what it means is that you incorporate all these human capabilities in an application. So when we talk of the context of now building data-driven applications to help us combat disinformation, which is quite on the rise, disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech, the envisioned, that was the vision that we could leverage artificial intelligence to tackle these menace.
Right.
But currently, as we speak, AI turned out to be a double-edged sword, in that the AI that was envisioned to help us tackle this rising problem has ended up, on the flip side, being now the tool that's amplifying racial bias, discrimination, and all the vices that comes with hate speech. That has brought a lot of concerns because, again, AI is coming out as a powerful tool. And as we all know, with great power comes a great responsibility. And we've seen instances where this AI as a tool has landed in, I would say, bad guys. And we've seen not so good or evil instances. And good examples is just what I've mentioned. That is racial, AI has come in. Well, on the positive side, it's helping us to combat this challenge at scale and in real time, like also the example of the project that we worked on last year. But the major concern as of now, and even currently as we speak, like I mentioned also at UN level, we have the Secretary General thinking of establishing an AI advisory board to support UN on its operations and also to guide on AI matters on regulation. So that really tells us that there's a lot of concern on not the bad side of AI. And I think when we look at our context, we're looking at one, AI is coming in to amplify the social inequalities, the discrimination of people. And we've seen this in various cases, like in Syria, when there was a lot of censorship across the digital platform, the journalists being flagged as offenders. Would go on and talk about all the same. We're also looking at China. They're using pervasive intelligence and are monitoring their people against, I think there's a minority Muslim group in China that they're using artificial intelligence recognition systems to monitor that particular group. So that tells us that there are a lot of also other ways that AI is being used for pervasive monitoring of people, and that is not in the public domain.
So that falls on the negative side of AI,
yes.
Well, let me ask you this. When you're looking at Twitter, for example, we see if a comment has been made, a tweet has been made, sometimes, like let's say from a politician or something like that, so then there's usually that disclaimer sort of like, this and this is not true, it's based on... Is that AI in use?
Yes. That's an AI application, and we've seen even also at the internet platform, we have the fact-checking web-based tools by Meta and also by Google. And I think it's the same with Twitter, in that they've been able to incorporate and integrate artificial intelligence systems within their systems that in real time you're able to flag down the content. So that's an AI application.
But you say it's a double-edged sword because there's still a lot that needs to be, because I mean, I can imagine, I mean, how would it effectively be able to differentiate this is a satirical content, this is legitimate debate on a certain issue, and this is something that actually borders on hate speech and disinformation. So you feel there's still a lot that we need to focus on when it comes to that?
Yes.
All right. Hopefully we'll be able to manage that situation. But you say AI is a good thing.
Yes, AI is the current, it's the future. Yeah. And I think for us, there have been fears that maybe in the employment workforce that AI is coming to replace our jobs. But in real sense, you look at AI is here to stay with us, and the need for us to just embrace it and look at how can we address the challenges, because besides the positive outcomes and opportunities that are coming for us to tackle disinformation and hate speech in real time, there are other pressing challenges that are coming up, like issues of data privacy, security concern, racial discrimination, amongst others. And that's where the whole conversation right now, even from the global leaders from the just concluded Geneva Summit, likes of the CEO of Facebook, Microsoft and the rest, the whole concern is, yes, we've seen the positive side of AI and we're moving towards an AI-powered future. But how do you ensure we have guardrails, we have regulations in place to ensure that all this power does not land in bad hands? Because we've seen cases of, like, even right now, I think I was reading an article on how people are testing and making experiments on how they can make chemical weapons with artificial intelligence. So that means that if AI power lands in bad hands, then I think we would have a different conversation.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know, John, what do you make of AI, and especially when civil society? I don't know if you're a techie or you're into those things, but anyway, I want to get your thoughts on the same, civil society also, because they're one of the biggest stakeholders in trying to combat especially issues of hate speech online. What do you think? Do you think this is the way to go? This is the future?
I totally agree with the co-panelists in that AI is both good and bad depending on how we use it. And a lot has been mentioned about the good side to it and the bad side to it. Just, I think, two additional things to it. And one is the fact that there is, we need to be very cautious on over-reliance on AI.
Right.
We've seen its effect, and that some of it has been mentioned. And a good example that very closer to home is what happened, for example, in Ethiopia, in the Tigray War, where by the use of AI, content that was hate speech inciting in nature was allowed to be on their platform. The hashtags were there, and it led to the actual killing of individuals. And now the individuals are in court against Meta here in Kenya because of that. But also on the other side, when there is not that over-reliance to it, but also control of AI. We saw it working when there was an attack at the Capitol Hill by the Republicans during that period, the Trump election period.
Right.
We saw companies, the tech companies, going in very fast and ensuring that AI does not continue to propagate hate speech and what have you. So it shows sometimes, there is that the AI is good, it can be controlled and ensure that things are okay. But also it shows that there is also a discriminatory nature of it. In Rohingya, again, war was running for 3 years. Facebook allowed content that was hateful in nature just lie on their platform, and people were being killed, people were being pushed out. So what's the difference here when it is?
I mean, the
it comes to the
is
US,
massive.
Yes, when it comes to the US, and I'm not reducing that attack to anything small.
Right.
They were very quick to act, and immediately within a day they managed to control the algorithms, so to ensure that hate speech does not continue. But even in their business model, which has been discussed before, we've seen discrimination to it. Even the way they zone out. So there is America and Canada to the beginning, then there is Europe, and then there is Asia Pacific, and then there is the rest of the world, which is 3 continents. It's Africa, it's Middle East, and it's Latin America. So the way they are discriminative in nature allows now AI to continue and cause harm to people in the 2 examples that I've given in those 2 countries.
Right. Let me hear from Angela on what you think of that, and also on the back of, and I know because Kictanet is very focused on especially women, right? Yeah. So there was a talk of a gender digital divide. So you can see Kennedy is very sharp on AI. You can see John knows all his matters of what is happening. But you feel like with that, is there a serious divide when we understand how things work digitally, especially when it comes to men and women?
There's a serious gender digital divide, and you can get data from the International Telecommunications Union on the number of men and women who can have access to the internet, who have mobile devices that are accessible by the internet and all that. And I also want to add that it also shows the already existent gender bias that we have in the world, that men still earn more than women, or that because of social and social constructs of what it means to be a man or a woman, then men are more adventurous, men are more curious to learn about technology, while women might not be.
So do you think that puts women in a more vulnerable position?
Yes, it does. It does in so many ways. First, women are not at the tables of decision making when tech issues are being discussed. So you will find less women as techies, for instance, or less women at the international governance forums that normally come up with serious policy decisions around tech. And remember that tech has a gendered impact on women. We've talked about online violence, and we're also now seeing that women have less access to the internet or less access to money that can help them have devices that can access the internet. So it's quite layered. Yes, so there's a gender digital divide. Yes.
And what do you think about AI yourself? Is that the future? Do you feel like in terms of combating, online harassment and hate speech and misinformation, you think also, I just want to get your thoughts as well on that.
It's actually interesting that you've asked, because yesterday I was just talking about the same issue. I was talking to the Global Diplomacy Lab about whether we can use AI to counter misinformation and disinformation. And my first statement is that that is quite an ironic question, so to speak, because the way AI operates is to mimic the human interaction, human intelligence, exactly. And it has been used over and over again to conduct online attacks. It's been used in forms of deep fakes. It's been used in altering audio clips. It's been used to come up with fake news over and over again. So asking the same technology that has brought us to this mess to remove us from this mess is a bit of an oxymoron to me. That's the first thing. Can it be used to counter disinformation, misinformation, and online harassment and online violence? I think it can, but it will require a paradigm shift in how even the technical community sees the product that they created, because it was not created with safety in mind, or it was created to mimic human intelligence. What happened and the impact it had is something we see like live. We are seeing also when we came up with deepfake, they can actually make a deepfake of a president. Oh my God, and that can, so we are finding out the impacts as it keeps on evolving.
So it goes back to what Kennedy was saying in terms of all these things that need to be looked at, and especially with the conversation globally that is happening on how we can be able to leverage on AI, but also manage how we use it, globally. There's a No to Hate campaign that you're also running with the UN. What is it all about?
It's been running from last year. Rather from 2021, concluding December this year. It's powered again, as I mentioned, by the UN UN SG's. That's the Secretary General's Advisors Office, based in Kenya. That's Alice Nderitu. It's more geared again to support the various local actors, that's the stakeholders, towards creating more information and media awareness, towards promoting values of inclusion. And that's where the conversation around ensuring, if it's the big tech companies, the algorithms that they're building for the African context, the digital platform, that they're able to put into consideration concerns as like the ones that have been mentioned by the co-panelists. That is ensuring that the marginalized communities, their voices are being included in the whole design, the transparency, the whole development of these applications. So basically, this whole campaign has been all around creating awareness, providing education and resources, materials or to the general public in support. Like currently, we also are working in partnership with ICT Authority, all towards on 3 items. That is media and information literacy, supporting big tech companies on the operations in Africa, putting them on accountable, and also ensuring that the African countries have a united front towards how they're able to tackle hate speech, because that's one of the key things and key concerns of the UN. And the third item being on policy design and development, and that's where now the UNSG, that's Antonio Guterres, has arrived at a point that now at UN level we need to have a UN advisory board that guides us on the regulation and the compliance on how we leverage these applications. So those are the 3 areas that this campaign has been mainly focusing on, mainly in Kenya, all around media and digital citizenship awareness, partnering with the Office of the Data Commissioner, ICT Authority, amongst other actors and stakeholders, guiding on policy design and development, and all that's taking shape also at the global level, and also ensuring that there's funding, there's support to support both the human rights defenders and the victims. So those are the three areas. But for me, I've been mainly involved on awareness and education all the way to the grassroots levels.
But you said we still have much more that we need to do when it comes to the issues of awareness. I don't know, let me hear from John on in terms of the issue of awareness as well. There is perhaps an idea that then why don't we include a program within our school curricula then perhaps. You know, we start from the basics, the young people, so that when they grow up, you know, they grow into this space, right? So we create that program on digital literacy and what do you call it, teaching safe online behavior to young people within a school and education curriculum. Do you think that's something that can help perhaps?
Yeah, and to mention, awareness has shown that it can really help when it comes to countering hate speech, but also misinformation and disinformation online. We saw a lot of work going into it before the last general election. There is the No Hate campaign. There was the Social Media for Peace campaign. There is the Missing Voices campaign. There was a lot of work by fact checkers around it, the African Uncensored, Piga Firimbi, Fumbua, and the rest. And it really helped in terms of debunking the lies that were going out, photos, images, and videos that are going out. So yeah, it's good if we can start this media literacy at an early age. First and foremost, no one is born with hate. People are taught as they are growing up.
Right.
They are socialized in knowing that you are different from me because we do not look the same, your color is different, you profess a different faith, and things like that. So no one is born with this. So it's acquired. So, and the first stage of socialization is at home, so with family. So that's when you're taught we are different. So if it can start at that level, and then it goes to now the digital media literacy in school.
And you're right, because it doesn't generate from nowhere some wires that created this thing. It's actually people who created and
it's not that way. And then
uploaded
as
all
you're
those
growing,
things, right?
now it develops. So you get into school knowing that we are different, me and this person, and then there are narratives around these people that is created. So you're told because they come from this side, and there are three, I call them the 3 Ds too when it comes to hate speech. So there is the dehumanizing, the degrading, and I'm forgetting the third one, where divisive. So you are taught that this person, you dehumanize the other person, and I gave the example, for example, the Hutu and the Tutsi, where you're told these are cockroaches, so they're no longer human beings. Then it is degrading. We do not belong to the same level. So there's superiority and inferiority. Then there is the division now. They're different, divide them from us. So you're taught that as you're growing up. So if you're taught we are the same, when you go to social media platform, you're taught to engage respectfully, to embrace inclusivity. When you go there is this way of reporting and how to interact with people in a proper manner. Then you are likely to create a culture of people who uses social media platforms for good. We also need to appreciate the fact that a lot of people who are using social media platform are young people. Before the last general election, Mozilla did a research, and it showed that one of the social media platforms that is now mostly used by young people is TikTok. And Mozilla did a research before the last election, and in its research, it noted around 130 posts on TikTok which had insightful, misinforming, or hateful messages.
Right.
And out of that 130 posts, there was like 4 million interaction on them. And these are young people, most of them.
4 million?
4 million young people are interacting on hate speech, insightful content, and misinformation and disinformation, sharing them in form of videos and what have you. So, and then the other thing is people will take advantage of these spaces where young people are to also push for their agendas which are hateful and inciting in nature, radicalization and what have you. So yeah, I agree definitely. If we start grooming young people from childhood to understanding how to use social media platform, understanding the context of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, hate, insightful, what is hate speech and what is free speech, then we're likely to have a nation where people appreciate hate speech.
Right.
Hate speech is a bad thing, and what is right, what is protected by the law, which is free speech.
And actually, as we speak about that, so I'll just read 2 tweets here. One is from Juma KE, who says, and this is responding to what we were talking about in terms of the digital gender divide Angela spoke about. So, and I don't know if it borders to on intolerance, or because, and I want you to respond to this, Angela. So Fed says, why does it always have to be about the girl child? Men too are affected. So does it speak to the level of awareness of the fact that there's actually a problem? There's actually a problem in terms of understanding there's a gendered aspect to the digital information out there. And let me mention the second tweet here, which also speaks on the same issue. They say men, Intelligence Inc. is called like that. So men invent social media, women capitalize on it via victimhood. That's how I got off on women, women this, women that activism. Is this just about women activism on that particular context you're speaking about?
I think it shows what I've been talking about, that there is patriarchy that is replicated and duplicated and amplified online. That the moment you say women, you elicit a certain response. And
it's sort of like it's inculcated in the brain that if you speak of a certain aspect that involves women in this way, it's always activism.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that this shows the problem we have already in society. That we think about women as in a certain perspective. And when someone advocates for women, there is a feeling that women have already gotten their rights, it's time to move on. I think that's a myth. We still are yet to get gender equality in this country. We are still yet to close the gender digital divide. Even as we don't, even as we need to ask ourselves, why are women silent online? Why are women not taking up tech as much as men? It's a legitimate question. And asking that question is frowned upon, and you get a lot of backlash for it, by the way.
Right.
So that, I think that tweet, those tweets already give credence to the research we've done.
Yeah.
And it gives legitimacy to the work we are doing, that there's a lot of pushback when it comes to women issues online.
Right. Okay, and because we're almost out of time, let me begin with you, Kennedy. You know, your final remarks as we move forward. I mean, you talked about the fact that on the 18th of June, that's a couple of days ago, we commemorated International Day for Countering Hate Speech, and there's a lot of conversation around that. But as we're moving forward, and you know, today is Friday, so usually our conversations are around young people. It's the youth perspective. So I'm sure a lot of young people are watching right now. What is that one thing, key area of concern for you as, you know, as we move forward in terms of ensuring that as we engage online, we also leave, you know, that space more safer as well, and we create a more safe space as an individual who engages in that space?
Oh, great. I think my concluding remarks will be, well, AI is here to stay, and AI-enabled applications to support combating these menace and other social-economic challenges within our African or the worldwide will continue giving us positive results. And I think for us as the youths, there's need for us to take up our mandate to understand more to the world, that's the Industry 4.0, the emerging technologies, upskill ourselves and take up our role in making sure that we're not conduit or we're not people who are sharing disinformation, misinformation, and to just make sure that one, we're able to fact check, we're able to verify any information that comes to us or any information that we share out there, take up the role of upskilling ourselves. There's that digital skills gap, the need for us to upskill ourselves to gain access to the knowledge and training capacity programs that are there, and again, look at how we can safeguard our operations on the various social media platforms. And make best use of the platforms, be it promoting our businesses, be it advancing our craft, or just doing whatever it is that you feel you can be able to meaningfully contribute to the economy creation. And yeah, I think that's all I would say about the young people. And globally and also at large, there is need for, as was mentioned, the multi-stakeholder approach to ensure that from the UN system, the government, civil society, private sector, academia, and all institutions come together so that we can all play our roles to make sure that our internet is more safe and secure.
All right, Angela, your final remark.
First of all, to just reiterate that women's rights are human rights, first of all, and they apply offline as well as they apply online. And I will call on all women to keep posting, to keep sharing their content online. We do not have enough content from the global south on the internet. The internet is still very Eurocentric. And we should try and have good content moderation policies that flag off harmful content so that we can all coexist online.
All right, fantastic. And finally, John, what is your takeaway?
So my final remarks, I think we all have freedom of expression, and social media platform has given us this opportunity for us to freely express ourselves, to use the platform for many, many things. I need to remind young people and those who use social media platforms that the same limitation to freedom of expression offline do apply when it comes to online. So when you get to an opportunity to use this platform, you also have to remember that freedom of expression is not an absolute right. It's a right that is limited, and therefore you have to use the opportunity in a respectful way, in a way that is right and also adheres to the community guidelines by the said products.
Indeed. Fantastic. Thank you so much, John Muthuri, Senior Programs Officer at Article 19 Eastern Africa, Angela Minayo, Advocate of the High Court, as well as a Women Digital Rights Programs Officer at KICTA-Net, and Kennedy Wangari, Data Scientist from UNEP in this context, but a big techie. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming in this morning. Just a quick update, by the way, on what is happening on the issue of the Titan submersible. We do know, and I'm getting this report from the BBC World Service, their live updates is that tributes are beginning to flow for the 5 men who were killed on board the Titan sub in what the US officials now say was a catastrophic implosion. The victims were Hamish Harding, who's a 58-year-old man, Shahzada Dawood, 48, and his son Suleiman Dawood, 19-year-old, Paul Henry, who was 77, and Stockton Rush, who is 61 years old. Their families have expressed profound grief and paid tribute to their exploration endeavors. A robotic diving vehicle found major fragments of the sub on the seafloor about 1,600 feet, that's about 400 meters from the Titanic shipwreck. This happened yesterday evening. It emerged that the US Navy originally detected an acoustic anomaly consistent with an implosion shortly after the Titan lost contact on Sunday. The banging sounds that were reported earlier this week are now thought to have come from other ships that were in that particular area. Well, the somber find ends a multinational 5-day search which spanned over more than 20,000 square kilometers of the ocean. That's the North Atlantic Ocean. So that's the live updates that we're getting on the issue of the Titan sub, and it's so unfortunate. We had hoped that the end will be quite different, but unfortunately we do understand that all those who were on board that sub have sadly perished, and this was due to what they term as a catastrophic implosion. I believe the investigations are ongoing, so we'll be trying to get more information on exactly what happened. The families of those who lost their lives are mourning the passengers killed in that sub implosion. And this is where we wrap it up on AM Live. Thank you so much for your company, your valid feedback. We'll continue engaging online as we stay safe and we create a safe space for everybody, our community online, so that even as we engage, we feel we're in a better space. And look, I know there's a lot of conversation on why there's that issue of gender digital divide, but I know that Angela will continue having that conversation. I don't know your Twitter handle. At Minayo Angela. I know Kennedy Wangari is just a Kennedy underscore. Yeah, Kennedy underscore Wangari.
Yes.
And at John?
At Muthuri Kathure.
At Muthuri Kathure. You can engage with Kennedy, John, as well as Angela online and just talk to them about some of these issues that we've had a discussion around today. This is where we wrap it up. My name is Zainab Ismail. Have yourself a good morning. Today is Friday, so it's the Morning Fix on Nation FM. Stay with us.